The epicenter is here in Hasbrouck Heights, New Jersey. It's a 3.0 magnitude that struck at 10:19 last night. Bergen County Sheriff's Office confirmed overnight that there were no reports of damage or injuries, but it was still a surprise for many. In fact, I spoke with a man named Paul who was also sleeping, just like another woman I spoke with earlier this morning.
In just a few decades, our species has successfully mapped the human genome, traced the chart of evolution, landed humans on the moon, captured images of black holes, and predicted dangerous hurricanes days before landfall. With so many breakthroughs achieved in such a short time, how could we still fail to predict the recent earthquake that shook New York?
We are continuing to follow some breaking news as an earthquake has been reported in New Jersey, just miles away from New York City.
And how did a low-magnitude earthquake spread farther than many larger disasters in recent years? Join us as we unravel the science, the history, and the unanswered questions behind the recent Hasbrouck Heights earthquake. Can we truly predict earthquakes in 2025? Right now, as you are watching this video, the ground beneath your feet is moving. Not slowly like the usual continental drift, but in a more violent way. At this moment, the ground is building pressure, accumulating stress, and preparing for a catastrophic release that could either happen by the next second or sometime in the next century. Our best seismic software models and supercomputers that are capable of processing terabytes of geological information each second and make impressive predictions still have no idea when the next one will hit. But that's not all. Even more frightening is the fact that we can't call it a failure of technology. It's not as simple as needing better instruments or more funding from the government. The disturbing truth is that earthquake prediction may be fundamentally impossible. And the reasons show just how confusing and unpredictable our home planet really is. Every time a major earthquake hits, whether the 2011 Tohoku disaster.
Today, March 11th, marks 14 years since the Great East Japan earthquake. At the exact time the quake struck, people across the country took time to remember the victims.
The 2010 Haiti earthquake, or the 2023 tremors of Turkey, the question remains, why didn't we see this coming? Considering what just happened near Hasbrouck Heights, New Jersey on August 2nd, the answer lies in the very complex nature of fault lines. Think about the Himalayas for a moment, the place where the Indian subcontinent continues to collide with Asia. Every year, India pushes up north by 2 inches, but the motion isn't smooth, as some of it gets absorbed by the upward growth of mountains, the sideways sliding of rock layers, and the absorption of kinetic energy in the crust. Having all of this happen at once is like slowly bending a wooden ruler until it snaps violently. For an even better example, the 2015 Gorkha earthquake that happened in Nepal released energy that had been building up for over 200 years. We knew this ahead of time, and yet it struck with little to no warning beforehand. Seismologists knew this region was overdue for a major quake, given how long it had been since Nepal's last major seismic event in 1833. The problem is that being overdue could mean anything from tomorrow to over 10,000 years from now. The earthquake lasted only 50 seconds with a magnitude of 7.8, yet it led to the demise of almost 9,000 people. This didn't happen because the earthquake was unpredictable in a sense or due to human error, but rather because while they knew Nepal faced a seismic risk, there were no technologies available to tell whether an earthquake was centuries away or just a few minutes away from happening. At best, our models work like weather forecasts, which means that they are more probable than predictive. With that in mind, let's now go deep into what happened on August 2nd. The recent earthquake, how and why. We'll start by covering everything that happened that night. At 10:18 p.m. Eastern Time on August 2nd, the earth shook in parts of New Jersey and New York. Thousands of people noticed it and gave reports about it, and it was later confirmed that it was caused by a magnitude 3.0 earthquake. But this is where it gets interesting. Although the earthquake was only measured at 3.0, people felt it not just in New Jersey and New York City, but also in various parts of Connecticut, eastern Pennsylvania, and even as far as southern New York State and Virginia. For those used to hearing of troubles like this, and much worse happening only in California, this came as a huge surprise. Worse yet, the far stronger earthquakes in California never came close to producing far-spreading tremors like this one. So what was the reason behind this? Why did a low-magnitude earthquake leave a much stronger impact than the more dangerous disasters of recent years?
The 1906 earthquake completely changed how we saw the science of earthquakes. The earthquake woke everybody up early in the morning on April the 18th of 1906. The epicenter was on the San Andreas Fault, just offshore from San Francisco, and then it ruptured to the north and to the south along the fault.
The answer lies in how that part of the country carries seismic energy. Let's break it down together. You see, the eastern half of the United States is much different from the western half in geological features, especially when it comes to seismology. This is because on the west coast, which includes seismically active places like California, the outer crust of the Earth is broken up by large fault lines, such as the famous San Andreas Fault. Geologists tell us that the crust there is much younger, warmer, and fractured. In simple terms, it absorbs much of the energy sent out from within the Earth whenever a major seismic event happens. This means much of the energy sent out quickly weakens as it travels upwards. Let's compare that to what happens on the East Coast, a region where the Earth's crust is much older and solid. In this other region, the hard rocks making up the crust are hard and cold, having lain for millions of years to settle into place. Thanks to this, underground shock waves easily move through the ground without getting absorbed and lose less energy. On the flip side, this means earthquakes of less magnitude can at times leave effects spreading hundreds of miles in all directions. This conservation of energy underground by the much stronger and solid crust of the East Coast means that small earthquakes can be felt over very wide areas. According to the United States Geological Survey, the earthquake started underground near Hasbrouck Heights in Bergen County. This area in northern New Jersey is just 8 miles west of Midtown Manhattan, which is the center of New York City. This short distance between both areas explains why people in both New Jersey and New York felt the tremor, and it came as a huge surprise for those in the area because earthquakes or aftershocks aren't common in those places. Interestingly enough, the epicenter of the earthquake was located inside the Hasbrouck Heights area. Under the surface, the earthquake started at a depth of over 6 miles underground, which is considered shallow for an earthquake. These unexpected kinds of earthquakes are usually felt more clearly at the surface, even when they aren't all that powerful. This means that while a deep earthquake can go unnoticed over long distances, a shallow tremor can feel more like a frightening jolt, especially when people are close. As we know, the earthquake was recorded and confirmed by the USGS, and their network of seismic sensors picked up the ground movement as soon as it happened. Based on what they confirmed about this, scientists noted that from a geological perspective, subsurface rocks on the East Coast act like a stiff piece of glass, implying that it carries waves much better over the cracks and bent rocks found in the West, making it easy to notice the mildest earthquakes from 100 miles away. As strange as this sounds, this is not a guess or theory, but has been confirmed by hundreds of past events in American geological history. Take the 2011 Virginia earthquake as an example. It was almost twice as dangerous in terms of magnitude, measured at 5.8 and felt in over 10 states. It was so strong that it was felt across multiple parts of Canada, yet much more devastating earthquakes in California have only been noticed across a few nearby counties. Another good example is the 2014 California earthquake that happened in Napa.
There were 14 maps released, and one of these zones was right where the 2014 Napa earthquake happened. For more on this now, let's head over to CBS 13 meteorologist Lisa Meadows.
This one had a magnitude of 6.0, which is a higher magnitude than the 2011 Virginia earthquake and 20 times more energy than the recent tremors of August 2nd. But even with that in mind, it also boils down to the nature of seismic waves and forces. As every trusted geologist would tell you, earthquakes produce two kinds of waves. The ones that move fast enough to arrive first are called P waves, while the ones that move slowly and cause more side-to-side tectonic movements are called S waves. S waves are what people feel most of the time during an earthquake, and these kinds of waves can travel over much longer distances because they pass through solid bedrock. This is likely what happened on August 2nd, and the waves that came from the shallow epicenter at Hasbrouck Heights traveled outward in all directions. Despite this, the waves were still strong enough to be noticed from dozens of miles away. With all that said, it seems the mystery behind this strange occurrence has been solved. But this is where it gets tricky, as there are even bigger questions to address based on these explanations. For example, if leading geologists tell us these quakes likely came from tectonic faults in New Jersey, why don't they appear on surface maps, and where do they come from? Stay with us as we address the truth behind these claims, their long-lost history, and much more. Answers from seismic tools and history. You see, apart from recorded history and living reputation, the reason most people never expect earthquakes in New Jersey and New York is that these areas are nowhere close to any active tectonic plate boundary like California is. However, the ground under the northeastern United States tells a much older and complicated history. This is most likely because the region sits on the North American plate, which formed over 100 million years ago. Back then, all 7 continents were joined together in what geologists call a supercontinent. This supercontinent is known as Pangaea, and during that time, the place we now know as New Jersey was pressed into other parts that we now know as Europe and Africa. A lot of things changed as these landmasses slowly began to drift apart, leaving deep stress zones and cracks in our planet's crust. Loss of these old cracks became known as dormant faults, and they still exist under the surface today. These dormant faults haven't moved in centuries, and because the crust in these places is so old, it has hardened over time into cold and dense rock. This makes it behave much differently than the younger crust plates that are found on the West Coast. So what causes the crust to be a lot warmer in places like California? The answer lies in the constant movement happening along the Pacific and North American plate boundaries. Each time an earthquake happens there, the energy gets absorbed and scattered by all the cracks. The shaking usually stays close to the epicenter, but on the East Coast, seismic waves can travel a lot further. This is to be expected because unbroken stones normally conduct energy more efficiently rather than just absorbing the shock. Therefore, a small quake can be felt in New York, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania, and that is exactly what happened on August 2nd. But then comes the big mystery. As of today, even with advanced AI software techniques like digital mapping simulations based on historical records and modern equipment, leading geologists still have no idea of which fault line was behind the recent Hasbrouck Heights earthquake. This is not due to a lack of efforts by researchers, but rather because of the unique geology, environment, and how cities were built long before these tools were invented. Most known faults on the East Coast were discovered from past earthquakes and exposed rocks in rural areas. But when we are dealing with cities like Hasbrouck Heights, Manhattan, and Jersey City, old and reliable methods simply don't work anymore. This is because the floors of these cities sit on countless layers of concrete that block direct observation. We are talking about building foundations, subways, and underground pipes. Because of these things, many areas have never been studied closely with modern tools. There are no long surface scars on the surface of these cities that can be easily observed, like the San Andres Fault.
Yeah, Adrian, over the last few weeks, these small tremors have been reported along the west coast of Northern California up to Washington state. Scientists tell us it's due to a phenomenon called slow slip, and it's happening north of us out in the Pacific.
It also doesn't help that there are fewer tremors to take advantage of, and while that might sound strange to hear from someone, the reality is that these earthquakes are our best shot at learning the origin and behavior of these hidden faults. They help scientists pinpoint where accumulated underground stress is piling up. The problem is that most of the east faults have been deeply buried and inactive for long periods, and the only way to find them is when one of them slips. While waiting for the next big tectonic slip since the one that hit New York in 1884, scientists have tried to study the little they could with advanced methods like LIDAR, seismic reflection imaging, magnetolurics, and borehole testing. These techniques need open land, surveys, and deep drilling methods that are often expensive and difficult to carry out. This is a problem even the United States Geological Survey has admitted, stating that fault mapping in the East Coast region is at least 30 years behind. The northeastern fault maps we rely on today were drawn out before GPS and satellite data became a thing. High-resolution ground sensors and AI simulations were the stuff of science fiction, especially back in the 19th century. Some of the faults that were labeled as inactive now deserve closer study as surface occurrences like the recent Hasbrouck Heights earthquake prove otherwise. But as always, the big problem comes back to cost and effort. In cities where earthquakes have never been a major concern, cutting huge chunks of the annual budget for studying problems that happen once every 200 years just isn't a priority. Because of this, millions of people live above fault systems that are either unmapped or misunderstood. Many problems arose because of this alone, as they affect how hazard maps are supposed to be drawn, how insurance policies should be given in places like New York and New Jersey, and how buildings should be regulated. A great example of this can be found in how the National Seismic Hazard Model only uses known fault lines to estimate future tsunamis and determine the provision of care and insurance. If there are unknown faults out there, they are taken as low risk by default, which can be very dangerous. Today, we are seeing these trends unfold in a very concerning way. In places like Virginia, Bergen County, and Staten Island, where minor earthquakes have occurred but fault structures remain unconfirmed, there are short-term mapping efforts made to find the faults behind the tremors and figure out how to accurately predict future events. Various teams used satellite interferometry and satellite tracking to pull this off, and the same thing is happening with the recent earthquake. Interest spiked for the first few days following the event, after which there was no incentive to keep trying. But here is the confusing twist that has puzzled scientists for decades up until today. Better tools and bigger problems. As confusing as it might sound, the fact is that we have better tools to do all this. The problem is that most of them aren't used or easily made for open use. For example, we have special tools called temporary seismic arrays that have helped geologists map out fault underground zones in Oklahoma and parts of California. By picking up shifts in underground rock to reveal patterns missed by overhead satellites, this tool has helped us notice and predict underground shifts. So why haven't these tools been brought in so far, and why aren't there any plans to do so anytime soon? Well, the reality is that this tool requires hundreds of sensors to pull off a single reading, and even then, a whole procedure can be a hit or miss. Simply put, it is practically and logistically impossible, especially when there is no federal mandate that requires that level of seismic monitoring in a seismic safe zone. Other technologies include ground-penetrating radar and 3D seismic reflection. These tools are mostly used in the oil and gas industry for exploration and mining. But using them on the East Coast for fault mapping today is unthinkable, as using these tools for things other than business can easily be considered inefficient and a waste of money unless either an executive bill was just signed or a very devastating earthquake had just occurred. With this in mind, what would it take to fully map the unknown faults in New York and New Jersey? Sociologists believe it's much bigger than a scientific issue, something that would take a regional collaboration between multiple states with federal support. Without a strong public push or secured government funding in the absence of more immediate problems, it is unlikely that these underground faults would be found out anytime soon. Either way, underground fault lines are just one of the many results of America's northeastern geology. Another result of the ancient geology we have are the movements of these hidden faults. The strange thing is that we see the evidence of their movement, but aren't sure of where they are. These faults don't move so often, and when they do, even our most sophisticated technologies are not good enough to give us a prior warning. Worse yet, since they aren't active like the San Andreas fault, the amount of energy released is not consistent over time. Rather, the stress builds up over long periods, sometimes hundreds of years, before breaking loose. Some of the fault systems in the region are the Ramapo Fault, which runs through parts of New York and New Jersey. These also include smaller zones under the Hudson Highlands and Appalachian foothills. Interestingly enough, these structures haven't caused earthquakes in modern times, but are easily linked to past events. The last strong earthquake in New York City was in 1884, and it centered offshore somewhere near Brooklyn. It had an estimated magnitude of 5.3 and was strong enough to damage chimneys and shake buildings not built to withstand earthquakes. Take this with a grain of salt, though, as seismological tools in 1884 were nowhere as accurate as the more advanced machines and equipment we have today. But what we do know for sure is that the effects match what scientists would expect from an East Coast crust. The area of impact was wide and the magnitude of the earthquake was moderate. Now, even smaller earthquakes follow this pattern. In 2020, the magnitude 3.3 earthquake occurred near Bedminster in New Jersey, but was still felt across different counties. As we've said, most of these earthquakes happen without any predictable pattern, except that they are expected to happen once every 100 to 200 years or so. What makes it concerning is that modern cities in these regions aren't built with earthquakes in mind. Some live under the unsafe impression that we can accurately predict earthquakes with our modern tools and equipment. And while that might be proven true to some extent, it often comes with a poor understanding of how our current models work and a failure to recall the countless times in the past when they failed. So, what do you think? Will we be able to accurately foretell the occurrence of earthquakes? Or will we keep grasping at straws before the next major event hits? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.